Hi. Well, do you remember that episode of Black Mirror that portrayed a technologically advanced world where everyone could see each other's profiles and their ratings in society on a universal app built into everyone's system? Well, we might be headed towards a similar fate with a slight modification. Instead of societal ratings, we would need to know one's pronouns so as not to offend them while addressing them. Like, does it sound ridiculous and hyperbolic? Or are you from the school of thought that believes in the use of preferred pronouns? While we'll explore both these questions, let's first address the elephant in the room. Are practices like using preferred pronouns in fandoms like the furry community indeed helping the LGBTQIA plus community? Welcome to For Your Information with Sriya Kundu, where we bring up all these awkward conversations and topics and questions that have occurred to you and made you wonder, but they've hardly been deconstructed for you. And today we were to discuss one such question: modern queer trends, yay or nay? Well, to answer this, we need some context to set the ball rolling. The LGBTQIA plus community has always been a heterogeneous community with open arms. Diversity defines them and acceptance is their guiding principle. Let's first look at the acronym in itself, the etymology behind it, and who the community comprises in the modern times. Etymologically speaking, the word lesbian was the first to come into existence. The term was associated with the works of Sappho, a Greek woman from the island of Lesbos who wrote poems about same-gender passion in the 17th century. However, it was much later in the 1890s that this term began to be used in the modern sense. One of its earliest appearances was in the English language's medical dictionaries and eventually in various books on psychology and sexuality. In the 1860s, a man attempted to label his community, and during those years, several replacements emerged to replace the original word earnings, coined by Karl Heinrich Ulrichs, who's a German lawyer. It was an Austro-Hungarian journalist, Karoli Maria Kartbeny, who coined the term heterosexuality, homosexuality, and bisexuality in letters addressed to the Prussian ministry. A century later, in the 1960s, activists reclaimed the slur gay to describe same-gender attraction. Tracing the exact origins of the word is quite tricky as there is no specific timeline. The culmination of these events led men to eventually embrace this term to defy the status quo and openly express their love for others of the same gender. With this, the acronym LGB began to be widely used in both the daily lives and liberal activism to define those who identified as lesbian, gay, and bisexual in the 1990s, creating a bond and sense of community among them. It took time to assimilate the term transgender within this umbrella. Though transgender individuals have always been a part of this society, historians trace its first use to around 1965 in psychology books or by the trans feminine activists like Virginia Prince. While this was the original term coined for the community, how did queer culture come into being then? The addition of the letter Q occurred much later. In 1910, it was used as a slur to refer to people separated from the heteronormative society at large. Eventually, queer began to be used by those within the gay rights movement during the 1990s. Experts often analyze this as an assertion of reclamation by the community members themselves. Today, the entire acronym LGBTIQQIP2SAA encompasses lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, questioning, asexual, pansexual, and non-binary people. It is an ever-evolving term to describe the one's psychological, sexual, and biological characteristics. So today, I am Sriya Kundu, she, her. if we go by the preferred pronouns. It is this ever-inclusive nature of the community that has now raised questions about their long-term sustainability in society. One such trend to consider is these non-binaries and their use of preferred pronouns. In fact, even by the people, the members of the heterosexual community. What began as a simple alteration from she, her and him, her to they, them now includes several other terms like ze, zer or ze, her. Non-binary individuals prefer gender-neutral terms like person, friend, human, kid, adult and children among others. So what is the concern that is being raised over this? An article from Harvard University, in fact, elucidates this in a very interesting way. The writer suggests that normalizing preferred pronouns may in fact lead to complexities within the community and society at large. Especially coming out to a society is an extremely intimate experience, and forcing the use of such preferred pronouns may lead individuals to either hide their identity or come out under circumstances that they are not comfortable with. Moreover, since they, them in English language refers to a third person account, using them for first and second person accounts often leads to confusion. In fact, let's examine all sides of the argument presented here. Firstly, some have raised serious concerns against the practice of using preferred pronouns. In fact, we'll see these often in news debates as well nowadays. They argue that normalizing this practice may compel people to question their gender and existence on a mass scale, similar to a midlife crisis. However, midlife crises have not affected society at large because they raise questions about the very foundations of society. They do not do that. Instead, it may disrupt the existing orders, these preferred pronouns, to the extent that it challenges principles as old as the social contract theory, the very basis of this very society. If we proceed towards making preferred pronouns the norm, we may eventually stop using language as we do now, challenging the very grammar rules of the English language. And while modifying or adding to an existing language is not a new practice, it does leave many matters open-ended, potentially having larger implications beyond language barriers. Normalizing preferred pronouns also makes communication channels more rigid, as individuals are always concerned about unintentionally hurting sentiments, thus reinforming and reinforcing new models of hierarchy and class. A whole new social order could be created in the process. But would this be the first time a new order is created in society? Doesn't evolution from the core form the very core of all living organisms on this planet? Well, that brings us to the other side of the argument. Members of this community have always been a minority and believe that no one has the right to describe their experiences with their biological, sexual and psychological selves other than them. Using only the two heteronormative pronouns of he, him and she, her is seen as a clear bigotry, in fact. Moreover, this group worldwide has had to fight for even basic human rights. Their struggle and vision reflect their challenges with the very idea of self and identity. For a community guided by an all-inclusive and ever-evolving motto, preferred pronouns represent a liberating change. While these are some of the basic arguments around the preferred pronoun debate, this community goes further to accept all forms of fandom within their queer living umbrella. Yes, that is the second part of our discussion. One recent fandom is furries. I'm sure you've all heard of it. In fact, being a furry isn't a sexuality or gender, but there is an overlap between the LGBTQIA plus community and this furry fandom. It's those people who come out to say, I identify as a dog or I identify as a cat. Well, by being part of the community, they explored their identities further. So who are these furries? The furry community shares a love of anthropomorphic animal characters. Many, in fact, create their own fursonas and interact with others in the fandom through these avatars, both in person through badges or costumes at conventions and online through these artistic renditions or forum handles. I'm sure we've heard of Comic-Cons. In fact, those used to be one such variation of it. In fact, furries, as we might say, is a particular offshoot which began as a Comic-Con. As a fandom, there is nothing concerning about their way of life. However, becoming part of the queer community is what raises the different concerns regarding this. Let's look at some of these examples. Toko. He's a man from Japan who made history by investing $14,000, which is approximately 12 lakhs, in a unique transformation journey to become a dog. He chronicled this entire metamorphosis on his YouTube channel named I Want to Be an Animal. Toko said that this journey helped him fulfill his childhood dream of embodying a border collie and experiencing the world through canine eyes. He now, in fact, wants to explore being another animal. A panda or bear, even a cat or a fox might be nice, he said in a very recent interview, in fact. Several cases are under trial in the court of law across nations where children in school have taken up similar identity theories and sued those who did not conform to them. Such cases highlight the impact that these trends are already having on society. Over the next 10 to 20 years, these trends may in fact become normalized. Well, that was all on this episode of For Your Information. And while we leave you with these questions to add some food for thought. Are we then looking at a major change in the coming decades in the social order that's currently existent? Could there be a time when heterosexuals become the minority? Or will the queer community continue to coexist within the current social order while implementing regulations to guide their interactions with society at large? And last but not the least, queer trends today. Yay or nay then?